Praise the Lord and welcome to Sunday Morning Christian Education. My name is Teraie Deloach. I attend Greater Bethlehem Temple Apostolic Church located on 4781 Hamilton Avenue in Cincinnati, Ohio, where Bishop James Chapman is the pastor. Today's lesson is titled Samuel's Call and Ministry. The lesson text comes from 1 Samuel chapter 3 verses 1 through 9 and verses 19 through 20 and chapter 7 verses 3 through 5 and verse 10 and 12. The golden text reads, "The Lord came and stood and called as at other times, Samuel, Samuel. Then Samuel answered, Speak, for thy servant heareth." And that comes from 1 Samuel chapter 3 verses 10. God uses children and teenagers in the ministry, not just adults. Let's take a look at a few. According to Wikipedia, Jehoash was 7 years old when he became the king, the 8th king of Judah. He reigned for 40 years, and it said that he was righteous until all the days of Jehoiada the priest. According to Britannica, Josiah was 8 years old when he became king of Israel. He remained faithful to God and was considered one of the best kings of Israel. Google says God used Jeremiah approximately at 17 years old. He was known as the weeping prophet. He was called by God to teach the people of Israel and warn them of the coming destruction that would be God's punishment for their sinful ways. In Esther link, Joseph was another 17-year-old who was rejected and sold by his brothers. Joseph was later placed over the assets of one of the most powerful men in Egypt. According to Wikipedia, Samuel was 12 years old when he was called by God. In the lesson today, Samuel himself knew about God, but he never had a direct encounter with him. He was never told what a call from God was like. So when God called his name, he couldn't comprehend what was happening. He wasn't dreaming. And he heard someone talking, but he didn't see anyone. It literally happened. And that time, God wasn't speaking much after the last days of the judges. But Samuel thought Eli, the priest whom he was staying with, was calling him. So when God called Samuel's name, Samuel went to Eli. But Eli said he didn't call him, so he sent him back to bed. Well, this happened at least 3 more times, and finally Eli realized God was calling Samuel. It took a while for Eli to realize this because he wasn't as obedient and sensitive to God as he should have been, because he wasn't tuned to God's voice. He told Samuel the next calling to say, Speak, Lord, thy servant heareth. Samuel had a willing and submissive spirit, because every time God called his name, he answered, even though he didn't know it was God calling him. This was the beginning of Samuel's relationship with God. You have to have your own experience and relationship with God. You can't go on what others say about him. Your experience would definitely be different than others. You have to know him for yourself. That's why it's so hard for people to believe in God, because they don't know him. You have to spend time with him daily like you do with a best friend or on social media. You have to pray to get to know his voice and hear his voice and his ways. And you pray for guidance and clarity. We live in a busy and crazy world full of distraction and sin. Make time and put forth the effort to get to know him like you get to know everything else. Put the phones down and video games. Get in a quiet place, read the Bible, study the lesson, go to church and Bible class. The lesson says Samuel's reputation as a man of God reached from one end of the kingdom to the other. God saw to it that everything Samuel spoke came true. None of his prophecies were ever left unfulfilled. Although Samuel surely viewed himself as nothing more than a servant of God, The Lord greatly honored him with his constant presence and vindication. You don't know what the Lord has planned for you. Don't miss out. Give him a chance. God is waiting on you. I hope I have put something on your mind. Until next time, God bless.